This would be a sitting quorum, not a walking quorum.
Okay. The meeting of the City of Socorro Council is set to begin. First and foremost, the City of Socorro would like to thank everyone and ask for your patience during this difficult time we have been presented with. Everyone, please remember to silence any electronics to avoid sound interruption. No disruptive behavior or outbursts will be tolerated, and violators are subject to call disconnection and possible prosecution. In accordance with Section 418.016 of the Texas Government Code and by the order of the Office of the Governor, issued March 16, 2020, the City Council of the City of Socorro will conduct the meeting scheduled today, Thursday, April 2nd, 2020, starting at 6 o'clock p.m. at City Hall Chambers, 860 Rio Vista Road, Socorro, Texas, via telephone conference and live streaming the meeting in order to avoid the public health goal of limiting the number of people physically present at our location, also called social distancing, to slow the spread of the coronavirus COVID-19. The public that signed up and any presenters will be called upon by the presiding officer during the meeting to speak during public comment or their agenda item during the meeting following Government Code 551.042. La Junta del Concilio de la Ciudad de Socorro está por comenzar. Primeramente queremos darles las gracias y pedimos su paciencia durante estos momentos críticos que enfrentamos. Favor de poner en silencio todo equipo electrónico para evitar interrupción de sonido. No se va a tolerar ningún tipo de comportamiento perjudicial o revoltoso. A quien no siga estas reglas, su llamada será desconectada y puede ser infraccionado. De acuerdo de sección 418.016 del Código del Gobierno de Texas y por orden de la Oficina del Gobernador, anunciada el 16 de marzo de 2020, el Concilio de la Ciudad de Socorro tendrá su junta hoy, 2 de abril de 2020 a las 6 p.m. en la sala del Concilio 860 Rio Vista Road, Socorro, Texas, por medio de teléfono, y la junta estará transmitiéndose en vivo para tomar medidas preventivas, limitando la presencia del público en este sitio para prevenir la propagación de la enfermedad del virus corona COVID-19 a los demás. El público y los presentadores serán anunciados por el oficial conduciendo la junta para poder hablar durante la sección de comentario público o después de la discusión del artículo de la agenda por cual se apuntaron siguiendo las reglas del gobierno 551.042.
Item number 1, call to order.
6:04, the meeting is now called to order.
Item number 2, Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
Ms. Navarro, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance
of the
flag
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
Indivisible,
liberty and justice for all.
liberty,
Justice for
and
all.
justice for all.
Establishment of quorum. Rene Rodriguez is absent. Cesar Nevares,
Here.
Ralph Duran,
Here.
Victor Perez,
Here,
Mayor Elia Garcia,
Here.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos.
Here.
Mayor, we have a quorum,
Item number 4, public comment.
and we have 2 speakers for public comment. Our first speaker is Isabel Castillo. And Mayor, she's been, she disconnected the phone call. Our next speaker is Miriam Cruz.
Ms. Cruz, you're not able to.
I hope you guys can hear me. Looks like the video just started. Oh, there you guys are.
I think you may need to raise your
I wanna-
volume, Ms. Cruz.
Okay, well I can try, but I'm not really sure. Maybe you can raise my volume.
I
Anyway,
can
wanted
hear
to
her
talk about
perfectly.
the problem.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. I think the problems that I'm having during this issue that we're all having to go through is actually a very old problem that you guys are well aware of, that I've been talking for a couple years now. The speed radar signs were removed from Stockyard Road, and now with kids and adults being home and walking around the neighborhood throughout the entire day, and because there's less traffic, as far as cars go, there is a lot of speeding going on along Stockyard. And I know that I had talked to Ms. Rolarte about getting possibly some rumble strips along Stockyard as an additional pilot program. And I just would be curious to know where the city stands on that and what you all are doing to deal with these things. Obviously, the problem is that because of the pandemic, there's obviously a larger issue at hand. But because of the pandemic, there are a lot of people staying at home, and safety now really does have to be a priority, not just health-wise, but I mean, literally, our lives are at risk by walking in our own neighborhoods. Trucks, work trucks, 18-wheelers are zooming by at a large amount of speed. And I believe now it's especially problematic because the speed radars were removed. I saw an increase when they were removed, and now it's even gotten worse. Of course, there's also drag racing. So because of the setup of Stockyard, there's a lot of drag racing happening as well along North Moon as well, which is outside the city limits, but it is in our ETJ. But it's happening on both streets. And so it's an issue that I believe the city needs to look at, because I've been talking about it for a while now, but also because it's especially problematic now with people staying at home. I think for now that's all I wanted to talk about on public comment. Thank you.
Mayor, and those were all our speakers. We
Moving
move
on to consent agenda. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve consent agenda?
Second.
And for the record, Rene Rodriguez joined the meeting at 6:07. Rene Rodriguez,
Yes.
Cesar Nevares
Here.
for the consent
Yes.
agenda.
Yes.
Aye.
Ralph Duran,
Yes.
Victor Perez,
Aye.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos.
Yes.
Item number 10, public hearing of an ordinance number 477, amendment number 1, amendment to decrease fiscal year 2019-2020 budget in the amount of $1,000, $755.50.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
It's a public
It's
hearing.
a public hearing.
Oh.
610, public hearing has now started. Ms. Granados, is anybody on the line?
No, ma'am.
611, public hearing is now closed. Item number 11, second reading and adoption of ordinance number 477, amendment number 1, amendment to decrease fiscal year 2019-2020 budget in the amount of $1,755.50.
Motion to approve for discussion?
Second.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. If you look at your backup, it gives you a little bit of a description of what the budget amendment consists of by department. So I'll briefly go through it. The city manager, we are increasing the budget of $65,000 for salaries, and that was just due to an error when we adopted the budget. That since some employees came to my department, Mr. Casiano did not add them to the total number, and that's why we're making that adjustment. The overtime did increase by $10,000, and that's because of the new department, the mechanics. Plus, we also are transitioning the HR department. We have the FICA TWC payroll taxes, which are also part of the adjustments that were made based on those positions that were added to my department. Also, the uniforms and the support activities were binders for employees for the appreciation luncheon. However, that was a sponsorship. It's just we're not able to see it in the actual budget. And also for the harvest luncheon. There's also an adjustment for the vehicle repair and maintenance since I did not have that line item before. We're just adding those line items to make sure that we track the expenses correctly. So with the same with the vehicle fuel. Under Public Works, the salaries, we are decreasing by $40,000, and that's just because we have vacancies throughout the year. Our overtime has increased, and that's due to events and the storm water days. Every time that it rains, we do keep our employees a little bit longer just to be able to maximize the pickup of the water. The $5,000, we had to purchase some weed eaters that we weren't accounting for. Building and property maintenance, we don't anticipate any major repairs this year, so we decreased that. Also, legal fees, they have very minimal usage for that. Property insurance did go up. The $3,500, there was added equipment and property that were added to our insurance. Also with the liability insurance, and then our vehicle fuel, we did deduct what the city manager is using, so we just changed it from accounts. Our fire and ambulance, we also added the service contracts, which we had to do a sewer connection to the Vineyard property. That was in the amount of $5,300. And we also had the vehicle fuel that was part of the contract. For our police department, we are decreasing that by $150,000, and that's just vacancies throughout the year. However, that has increased our overtime by $120,000 because we have to make up for those vacancies that we have. We also have the deferred compensation. We have more people that are participating, which that's great news, but we did have to make an adjustment there to increase it. For the building and property maintenance, as you all know, with this new modular, we do have expenses that we weren't.
Mr. Perez?
Yes, Adriana, thank you for the update. Just a quick question. When you said the police department, for the positions, we can't keep that, and then we're not anticipating them hiring between now and the end of the fiscal year?
So at this time, because of our current situation, we had halted the hiring freeze. I know that we had talked about bringing back adding the 6 officers. However, we have vacancies right now that we haven't been able to fill. So by me and Chief, so we're gonna maximize. We just never thought that this COVID-19 was gonna hit, but we were going to maximize the hiring and making sure that we're full capacity. And then for the next fiscal year, we will allocate the 6 new officers.
Okay, so at this point, I guess the short answer is no, we're not going to hire until the start of the next fiscal year, correct?
Correct. So the recruitment takes a while. It's not something that happens overnight. I mean, and we've never been at full capacity. So in talking to the police chief, we do believe that by next fiscal year, we should be at the next 6 that he requested.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Nevares?
No, I don't have anything. Sorry.
I'm sorry if I looked like I was saying hi. I was trying to get my hands up.
We
Yeah.
saw you. We saw you.
René Rodriguez.
No, we're good.
Okay, so do you want, I'll go ahead and continue. So it's the municipal courts, the overtime has increased, and that's just for increased services. That was increased to $750. Also, the deferred compensation increased by $2,000, and that's just because there's more participation from the department. Our planning and zoning departments, we did decrease it by 30,000, and that's vacancies that we have in the department that we're not going to be able to use those funds this year. And we also made adjustments to the Medicare. Again, the deferred compensation, we do have participation from our employees, which is great, and that's why you're seeing the increase there. And the property and equipment, we did decrease it by $15,000. We're not making these purchases this fiscal year for that amount. Her economic hat on, so she had to attend training for that. So we did go ahead and remove it from grant expense and allocated it to the travel lodge. So that's like a wash for that department. Our HR department, as you know, we no longer have our HR director, so you'll see a lot of decreases in that department. However, we did increase the 30,000 for service contracts, and that's to pay for the HR Kano group. And also there is a couple of trainings that Ms. Mayela is attending, so we want to make sure that we keep it in the HR department to be able to allocate exactly what's going through HR and what's going through executive assistant. That way we have better track of that. We also have an increase on polygraph and psychological PD evaluations under HR. So we did increase it by $2,700. Our mayor and city council subscriptions, we did have to pay the subscription for the Conference of Mayors, and that was $4,000, so we had to make a adjustment there. And also there was a property damage claim that was paid and approved by council of a $220, so we hadn't allocate that funding, which is why we're making the adjustment there. And then for the city clerk, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And then for the finance department, we did also increase the overtime, $750, and that's just increased services. Sometimes we do get overwhelmed with bills and stuff, so they have to pay, do a little more. We did decrease the bank charges by 12,000. We'll not be using this fiscal year. And our liability insurance did go up, and that's just adjustments that are made by the insurance company that they change by the pricing changes every year. And that unfortunately happens after our fiscal year, and that's why we make the adjustments later. And our recreation center is increasing 11,300, and those are just sponsorships that he received, and he did want to increase it for his events. Unfortunately, we probably won't use that because of this COVID-19, which when we go to our second amendment, you'll probably see the decrease there. And that is my recap for the departments. I don't know if you all have any questions.
No, thank you.
No, thank you. It was very informative.
Rene Rodriguez,
Aye.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Ralph Duran,
Yes.
Victor Perez,
Aye.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos.
Yes.
Item number 12, discussion and action to approve Resolution 616, proclaiming the month of April Fair Housing Month in the city of Socorro, Texas, to end housing discrimination and raise awareness of every resident's fair housing rights.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Alejandra Valadez, Grants Coordinator for the City of Socorro. So the month of April is National Fair Housing Month. This year, it marks the 52nd anniversary of the Fair Housing Act. This is a federal law that is designed to protect Americans from discrimination in the sale, rental, and housing based on the 7 protected classes, which are race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, and national origin. And so we want to take the opportunity of the month of April to inform the general public that they do have these protections via the Federal Housing Act. And we also want to make it known how to file a claim in case residents have been discriminated based on one of the 7 protected classes. And I do want to go ahead and share a little bit more information. I'm sharing my screen right now.
I can see it.
Okay. So briefly, the 7 protected classes are, again, race, color, national origin, familial status, religion, sex, and disability. In terms of race, this is a federal classification, and they do have these categories for race: Asian, African American or Black, Native American or Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander or white. An example of housing discrimination based on race would be if a landlord or lender, one second. If a landlord or lender steers a Black family from renting or purchasing a home in a predominantly white neighborhood because they are Black. In terms of color, this has to do with the pigmentation of the skin. And color discrimination can occur between individuals that are of the same race. An example of housing discrimination would be if a real estate agent shows homes located in low-income neighborhoods only to people with darker skin colors. For national origin, that refers to your ancestry, birthplace, ethnic background, or limited English proficiency. And that applies to your reading, writing, speaking ability. An example of housing discrimination would be a property management company that requires residents to only speak English in common areas. That's an example of housing discrimination based on national origin. The next one is familial status. And familial status protections includes people who are pregnant, parent legal custodians of a child living with them who is under 18, or trying to secure custody of a child. Also, it is not allowed to have extra restrictions that target only children. For example, kids are not allowed in the pool. That's not allowed. And an example of housing discrimination would be if a landlord produces discriminatory advertisements, like advertisements that say no children. The next one is religion. It is illegal to discriminate against members of a particular religion or even people that don't have any religious affiliation, such as agnostics or atheists. An example of housing discrimination based on religion is a leasing agent states that no units are available to someone wearing a head covering when apartments are in fact available. The next protected class is sex, and that involves gender stereotyping, discriminatory pricing based on your gender, and then sexual harassment. An example would be a landlord cannot deny access to or membership in a facility or service due to someone's biological sex. And then the next one is disability. So a disability is a mental or physical impairment that substantially limits one's major life activity, a record of an impairment, or being regarded as having an impairment. An example of this type of discrimination is refusing to make a reasonable accommodation to grant permission for an assistant animal, like an emotional support animal or any type of animal that is used for that disability, or assigning an accessible parking space for a person who has a mobility disability. We want to make it known that anybody that is a resident of Socorro has these rights and is protected by the Fair Housing Act. You can find more information about your housing rights by visiting the HUD Fair Housing website. If you are a landlord, property owner, or a manager, you can also get training for your employees so that you make sure that maybe your maintenance staff is not inadvertently discriminating based on these protected classes. You can visit the Texas Workforce Commission to get training. And then if you feel like you have been discriminated against or you would like to file a complaint, you can visit the HUD Fair Housing website, or you can call 1-800-669-9777. And then, of course, all of this information is also available on the City of Socorro's website. If you log into the city's website and you look at the top header and you click on under public engagement, there will be a fair housing tab. And what you'll see is something like this. If you scroll down, you will see more information about the protected classes, as well as the phone number and website link where you can file a complaint. And that is it for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very informative.
Thank you.
Rene Rodriguez,
Aye.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Ralph Duran,
Yes.
Victor Perez,
Aye.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos.
Yes.
We can't hear Mayor. She's reading.
Mayor's on mute.
Item number 13, discussion and action regarding 5310 grant agreement.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Hi, everyone. This is Victor Reta, Public Information Officer and Recreation Director for the City of Socorro.
How are you,
as-
Victor?
Thank you. Good. I hope everyone's staying safe. As included in the background, we are looking to get an extended contract with the EPMPO to utilize the remainder of our 5310 grant funding. What this will do is allow us to procure software in order to streamline the transportation program, to keep everything organized and intact online and cut out a lot of our paper documents. This would allow us to easily track and report and also help our grant administrator with grant compliance. We are getting funds from a grant with a portion coming from our M&O budget, which would be about $541.
Rene Rodriguez,
Aye.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Ralph Duran,
Yes.
Victor Perez,
Aye.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos.
Yes.
Item number 14, discussion and action regarding leave of absence policies and employee pay issues during COVID-19 health and emergency.
Motion to approve for discussion.
Second.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So as you all know, this COVID-19 just got us by surprise. So we're trying to come up with policies. I've been working very closely with the attorneys. And on March 23rd, Mayor gave an executive order for us to close all city lobbies and offices to the public beginning Wednesday, March 25th, until further notice. During the time, only essential personnel will be working. This is in cooperation with the Governor Abbott and County Judge Ricardo Samaniego to combat the spread of coronavirus. Mayor authorized the city to pay all employees who are affected by these orders. So we just wanted to make sure that we had a policy that would cover these orders to make sure that we are in compliance. So the policy is in front of you, but that's not the, it's the backup. Do you all have your agenda item in front of you?
Yes.
Okay, so the City of Socorro leave of absence policy and COVID-19 legislation just goes over the emergency paid sick leave that the city would be using. It says the purpose of the leave that can be taken and how it affects the FMLA requirements and everything that pretty much covers us. I don't know if you all have any questions.
I do.
Mr. Rodriguez?
So this is what we're saying. We're saying that everybody's going to get paid. So what's the difference between the people that are home? Because for me, it's a mandatory vacation. And what's the difference between them and the people that are out there working still?
Correct.
So if I'm not done.
Sorry.
So my question is, because some of my constituents asked me that, and I really didn't know what to say, because I see their point of view. It's like, well, the police officers are out there in harm's way. I mean, of course, they're in that line of duty. Of course, they know what they got themselves into in the beginning. But one of the things is, this is something that has never happened in my lifetime. of course, none of ours. So this is something new. But to address the thing is, you only have to self-quarantine for 14 days, but then you could go back to work. So I don't understand what necessary steps we took to close down just because we want to prevent this thing from spreading. But my thing is, just because the county closed theirs, you know, did all the municipalities close theirs or just the county, and then we're just following what county's doing?
Ms. Villalobos?
There's people with secondary illnesses that are affected and have the coronavirus. And those take a little bit longer to heal. And I don't think this policy covers in case they do have that, because I mean, obviously they can't come back to work. So, and I understand where Mr. Rodriguez is coming from as far as compensating in case they do have the coronavirus and they have to stay in quarantine for 14 days. And so I just wanted to let you know that in case this, I don't think we have anybody right now, correct? Thank God that we don't. But there could be secondary illnesses that could prevent them from coming back to work. And I don't think this covers.
Yes, so the policy does cover different situations. Of course, there are many scenarios and many situations, and employees are being asked that if there's a legitimate concern to come and talk to either HR or the city manager, and we deal with them on a day-to-day, on a case-to-case basis. But this policy in front of you does cover most. There's also employees that are prime caregivers to their parents that are at greater risk, and those employees are being allowed to stay home in order to not bring that exposure into their homes, right? With the proper documentation. But I mean, I can go on and on of different scenarios that have come through my desk. And I think we tried covering as much as we can. However, we are dealing with them on a case to case, but the policy that's in front of you does cover most of it. And there is a section there that it'll cover at the discretion of the city manager to send people just because they can't either, they're not considered essential because they're either not outside assisting and it's not common practice to have them come in every day to work if we can keep them at home
Mayor.
protecting.
Mr. Martinez?
Yes, ma'am. Mayor and council, just trying to clarify, there's really two different issues that we're talking about, and maybe part of the discussion needs to be reserved for item 16, or you could take up item 16 at this time. But the executive order that the mayor signed on the 23rd addresses two separate things. It's leave issues and pay during that leave period, but it also addresses simply reporting to work and the congregation of people in a particular location, like lobbies of city buildings. Those are two separate items. Legally, they're two separate issues, and there's two different sources of authority in the government code. And my only point is the leave issues are what is properly addressed in item number 14. And there was federal legislation that was passed a couple of weeks ago that mandates paid leave if someone is diagnosed with the virus, was exposed to someone with the virus, or has a family member who was diagnosed with the virus. Okay, separate and apart from that are the governor's orders and the county judge's orders about closing unnecessary businesses and having people congregate in certain areas, which I think would apply apart from the leave issues in some of the city's offices. And again, you can do that under item 16 in a moment, or you can take up item 16 now.
Rene Rodriguez.
Hold on, Jim, could we take item 16 now?
Yes, sir, you can. It might be useful to do both, because then I know you're talking about leave issues, but then you can also talk about having people, whether or not people are coming to work and why, whether they're telecommuting, that sort of thing.
Right, so then my motion would be to, could we move item 16 to our current item for discussion?
Second.
I think I had made a motion to approve item number 14 for discussion, no? Or was it you or me? Who made the motion?
No, it was you and I seconded.
Right, so then I'll go ahead and rescind my motion at this time. And then I'd like to make a motion, if I can, to go ahead and move item number 16 and to discuss items 14 and 16 at the same time.
Thank you.
Rene Rodriguez,
Aye.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Ralph Duran,
Yes.
Victor Perez,
Aye.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos.
Yes.
And just for the record, we did have a speaker for item 14, and we will allow that speaker, once the discussion is over for item 16, to speak on both items.
Item number 16, discussion and action regarding the adoption of an emergency ordinance to institute measures because of public health emergency arising from the COVID-19 pandemic, including ingress to and egress from certain areas and locations, occupancy of certain buildings and other premises, the closure of and limitations on the operations of non-essential and other businesses, and procedures to enforce these measures, including the establishment of a penalty.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
I'm sorry, who seconded?
Me.
Thank you, Mr. Nevares.
Thank you.
And we have a speaker, Miriam Cruz.
Ms. Cruz, you're able to speak.
Sorry, can you repeat the motion?
Motion to approve.
Number 16? Or
Correct.
Number 14?
Both.
16.
It's,
Well, so
Okay,
there.
I guess I had a question as far as number 14. I understand that the lobby areas are closed, and I was just wondering if maybe the public can get an idea as to what services are essential and what services are continuing from home. Just because I think it would be helpful to see who we can reach out to and who we can't. And if maybe
Ms.
there can be a
Cruz?
list of,
I'm not
Yes?
sure if you're too close to your phone. You may have to pull it away from you just a little bit because you sound muffled.
I don't know if this is better.
Yes.
I can hear you fine.
Me too.
Okay. And so, and that was in regards to number 14. Obviously, there's obviously federal laws and state laws that you guys are having to follow. But I was just wondering, as far as if we can just get an idea to the public, what groups of, which offices are still going to continue to work from home, so that we're aware, you know, that we can reach out and not just feel like the whole city is shut down. And as far as 16 goes, I'm not really sure what you're approving because I guess, are you approving that you're going to start creating measures? Or are you approving certain measures that I must have missed in the last 2 minutes? Because I'm not really sure what's being actually getting approved on number 16. But my main concern on 16, if I can just go up the item, the main one was recycling centers. I'm not really sure if Mr. Nevares was referring to private ones or the one that the city has, because there are a lot of.
I'm sorry, I was referencing the private ones.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, that was my only concern. I just wanted to make sure that the city was going to continue with their recycling one. That's it. Thanks.
So I wanted to discuss a little bit more the policy for item 14. The sick leave covers anybody that's been impacted by this COVID-19. There's people that have been impacted directly or indirectly. We've had several situations throughout the city, and we're trying to create a policy that will allow us to pay the employees that have been impacted by this pandemic. Also, we had Bruce worked with me because there are employees that are coming to work every day and are exposed to the public. All of our city lobbies are closed to the public. However, we're still conducting business. We're available by phone. Our public works is still out there. So is our police department. Recreations is still serving our senior citizens and anyone that is in need in the community. They're here to assist. So we want to make sure that we continue servicing the community, but it's becoming a challenge because there are employees that just are afraid, don't want to come to work. So me and Bruce and Jim were talking, and if you see in addition that we had sent out, and I don't know if Mayela can pull it up on the screen for the policy regarding temporary additional compensation for essential personnel. That covers these instances. Not everyone is coming to work every day, either because they're being sent home, again, because either someone visited our office and they were tested positive, so we had to send them home for quarantine. There's some that have family members that have been impacted. We just have very, very different situations. And there's some employees that just really are concerned. Their family members are concerned. So it's becoming a challenge. And by talking with the attorneys and we're trying to come up with the best solution to make sure that we continue servicing our community the best way we can. We're coming to work every day and making sure that we're answering those phone calls, but it is becoming a challenge. And that's why we're bringing these policies forth, just to make sure that we're thinking outside the box and making sure that we're taking care of our employees also, because it's impacting them too.
Mayor?
Mr. Rodriguez?
Okay, to my first point again. The issue I see and I face is that if we're going to be fear mongering and our employees are going to be fearful because they might catch it, I understand. Everybody that in the world at this moment is scared, but we still have to provide essential services to our constituents. And I understand that when we sign up, there's always a poster that says, it's not what you can do for your country, I mean, it's what you can do for your country, excuse me. But the thing is that there are some that are going to choose to stay home and not come. And what about the people that are working, that come out every day? That's the issue I have. And that's one thing that I can't explain to my constituency when they call me and they tell me, hey, well, why are you paying them to stay home on a forced vacation and the rest are working? So there's the issue. How much money are we talking about? To point for one of our speakers is what personnel and administration is working and who's not. What services are we providing? Because those are questions that we have to tell our constituency that, the city is going to provide services. We haven't stopped providing services. I know that some departments have stopped, but we need to make it clear that the city will move on, that we are going to still be working. So my point is, how much money are we talking for sending everybody home?
Mr. Perez?
Two things. Jim, I don't know if you can hear me. I think we're talking about two different things. Those employees that have been deemed as essential and those employees that out and out don't want to come to work for health concerns. And so what leverage, not, and I guess leverage is the wrong word, but what is our authority regarding those individuals whose job functions have been deemed to be essential and them not wanting to report to work?
Yeah, if they're, well, let me back up. You're correct. There's really, you can bifurcate just the personnel issue. There's the federal legislation controls where someone has been exposed, someone, their family's been exposed, or they've been diagnosed, or someone in their family's been diagnosed. Okay, then they are entitled to certain leave periods, and those are capped by other laws. But where someone is deemed essential, there's no known diagnosis and no known exposure, then yes, legally you have the right to still require them to report to work. Legally, you do not have to pay them if they decide not to come to work, subject to PTO policies and any other kind of leave they may have. That's a legal right. I mean, I defer to counsel and to HR and to your city manager, who is herself an HR professional, about how hard they want to enforce those rules given the current unusual situation, but legally you have that right.
Because that's my concern, is that I understand the mitigating health factors in the concerns, but if the essential personnel are in situations where we can support the situations where they're distancing themselves appropriately, they're limiting contact with other individuals, we're providing them with masks and those kinds of things that would hinder, I guess, being infected. I think that would be reasonable. Wouldn't again? That's just a thought.
Legally, whether or not it's reasonable, I'll leave that to Adriana in HR, but legally it's permissible. I mean, for instance, maybe the most obvious example is PD. The city doesn't have enough police officers as it is. I think every single peace officer that you have on staff is going to be deemed essential, and you need them working. If someone has some trepidation about that and they don't want to come to work, or they're reluctant to, legally, I think the city has every right to say, we're sorry you feel that way. Here's your mask. Here's your gloves. Stay 6 feet away from others when possible. We're requiring you to work. That's one of the terms of employment that the city is entitled to enforce.
Thank you. And Mayor, one more question, but to Adriana. Adriana, are you there?
Yes.
So then what stance does HR have in terms of making the essential employees report to work when there is no diagnosis, unless that we require, and maybe I'm off the mark here, but we require some doctor's note or something that says, well, no, this person has been exposed, yada yada yada. We're asking them to stay home.
So I think it's unprecedented times, right? So I know that the recommendation out there is if someone's feeling an itchy throat, not feeling well, they are being asked to stay at home. And
Right.
that's just for the protection of others, because we still have to be providing a service. With that being said, I have employees, of course, my throat is hurting, I have a cough. And unfortunately, we can't take any type of risk and
Mhm.
allow them to come and expose our other staff members. And as we all know, it's also allergy season. So the employee knows their body more than anyone else. And right now, there has been several employees that have been asked to either go to the emergency room or go see their primary doctor, depending on the symptoms that they're having. But right now, we have had sent people home just by them saying that we're not feeling well. Then we follow up with a phone call every day, see how they're feeling. Do they have any fevers? And then we ask them to come back. And that's how we're monitoring it right now. Again, we had a department that was exposed to someone that did test positive, and all of those employees were sent home, but none of them have symptoms at this time. But we do have to monitor, and we need to make sure that we're taking all the precautionary measures in order for us to avoid the spread here in the city, because once it hits us, then we won't be able to provide those essential services that we need. So I'm not taking anything for granted, and I'm taking people's words. However, I do feel that at this time, most of our employees, and I think that, by hearing the news every day, I mean, the more and more concerned they become in coming to work and being exposed to the public, such as our public works and our police department.
Mayor,
Ms. Villalobos, and then Mr. Duran, and then Mr. Rodriguez. Ms. Villalobos, go ahead.
Thank you. So, Ms. Adriana, my understanding is, well, I was gonna ask if these employees are being asked to go to their primary doctor, get a doctor's note, but also, if they stay home because they have, I don't know, pneumonia, strep throat, the flu, are they getting paid? And if they are they using their sick leave to get paid? How are we handling this
So
one?
at this time, no, because Mayor, during her executive order, she said to go ahead and pay employees that are being impacted by this. They're not being asked to use their sick leave. We are actually tracking anyone that is being sent home or goes home. We're tracking it and allocating as COVID-19. The government has said that they will reimburse small businesses. We are considered a small business because we're under 500, and we're keeping track of every purchase that we make, and any leave that anyone takes, we're coding it as COVID-19 in order to see if we can get reimbursed for those funds. Also, please remember that we are budgeted for the year. So it's not like if it's gonna, because we're budgeted for the whole year. However, right now it's just there's people that are being impacted that don't have any leave available. And that is the reason I think that the mayor made that call, was how can you put those people out of work, because we're the ones that are sending them home on most cases, just to make sure that we protect our other employees that are walking in and coming in to work and provide those services to our community.
Mr. Duran?
Are we requiring them to have a coronavirus test before they come back to work?
So as we all know, the tests aren't just available to anyone. They have to go through a screening with their primary doctor. At this time, we're not, like the people that we send for quarantine, we're not sending them to testing. We're just monitoring their symptoms for the 14 days. So we have Mayela or myself calling them every other day just to follow up to see what how they're feeling, making sure that they don't have a fever, and see what other symptoms that they're coming up with. Most of them all come back saying that they're still feeling fine. We have not have a confirmed case, but we've had several challenges. This week we had a huge challenge in our public works department, where an employee comes in and says that he's not feeling well and exposes about 7 of our employees, and we had to really send everyone home. We are taking all the necessary, and we are disciplining. It's not like we're taking it lightly, but at the same time is we need to be sensitive to the people that are actually afraid or have someone at home that is challenged, and we're asking them to come out. And we don't know where our coworkers have been on the weekend or what they do after work. We do tell them that they need to stay home, make sure that they practice their social distancing, wash their hands, make sure that they follow all of the steps, but we really don't know what they go home and do. And we do work with them the next morning. And I know that Public Works has a total of 25 employees. We're trying to take as much measures, but as you all know, at the beginning, we weren't even able to find hand sanitizers or masks for them. Right now, we have ordered some, and we have just received some PPEs, but at the beginning, we really were not prepared for this. And so we were trying to save the little bit of supplies we had, to when it really hit the peak, right? Because we're not even there yet right now.
Well, the other thing to keep in mind is that I think that a lot of people are testing positive and they don't have any symptoms at all. So how do we know if somebody really does have the COVID and is not showing any symptoms now or within the 14 days? Mr. Rodriguez?
Well, my issue is for the essential employees that just because they're afraid and don't want to come to work, we need them, period. You know, they signed up. It's like, let's take the police officers. If we had in our city the ability to have the fire or the ambulance services, those are essential. Those are essential. They already know that they're going to be in harm's way, period. Regardless if it's a virus or someone with a gun or with a knife or with explosives, we know that those jobs require the best of them to come out and put themselves in harm's way. But when I feel, and I've seen many of our employees out in the weekends, okay? They're not at home, not all of them, I just said some that I've seen. So it's not like they're following the rules of the 6 feet or so, or congregating in somebody else's home, and yet you want to play the, oh, I'm afraid, and then want to get paid. What about the ones that are out there in the front lines fighting for us, that are taking care of us at night? What about them? It is very unfair. And are we taking, and I guess you answered my question, Ms. Rodarte, when you said, well, the clock starts and we're calling them every day for 14 days. After the 14 days, if they don't show no symptoms or anything, they should come back to work, because it's very unfair that their colleagues are out there, you know, protecting us, providing the service that our constituents want and need. So those are the issues that I have, is that, you know, when we go out and we say, hey, we're forcing everybody to go home, but we're going to pay you. I mean, it's not like I'm not going to feel sorry for anybody because you're getting paid. There's people that are being laid off in the private sector that aren't getting a check. What am I going to tell to those constituents that that's what we're doing, that's what we're going to do? You know, those are the things that we need to address. And I've told some that, hey, these are the individuals that are out there in the front line, and you have to take care of them, because they're the ones that are going to take care of us when we're sleeping at night, comfortable in our beds. They're providing the service that we need, that we want. You know, those are the things that I'm just playing devil's advocate. I just want it out to be out there to say, hey, you know what? We're keeping an eye on our employees. I think that Ms. Rodarte is doing a great job, and Maela as well. We have a good staff that's you know, just on their toes all the time, just making sure that everything falls into place. And I just want all our constituents to know that the city will continue to work.
Mr. Perez?
I just, again, I understand the concern of balancing people that need to stay home for the fact that they were exposed, whether it's at work or to a family member. I understand that, the quarantine and all that stuff. I understand that. But when a person chooses not to go to work, that's a different story. I think that what we can do as much as possible is provide the protective, the PPE as much as possible. But also at the same time, I think that we need to also be cognizant that when people are, because I can see for myself, I know that I'm on duty from 8 to 5, and that it would look weird for me to be out and about taking care of personal business when I'm on the clock. So if somebody is saying I'm staying home because I don't feel well, that's fine. But by the same token, I think and I think maybe Adriana has touched upon it. I'm not sure that those individuals that choose to stay home because they feel compromised somehow, that they are given a directive not to be out and about. that, because I know that that's the one thing that we are, risking is further contamination. Apart from the providing services and those kinds of things, the functions of the city, but we also need to mitigate whatever potential exposure our employees, the employees are causing in the public when they say, you know what, I don't feel well. Well, then you need to, if you're going to stay home, you need to stay home. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Mr. Duran?
I'm just wondering if we have some employees that are afraid to come to work. Can we furlough them, and then can they apply for unemployment benefits until this is all over? We don't want to lose employees but I mean, I understand that some of them may be afraid. They may have lost a family member or know somebody that's passed away from the virus. And I'm just wondering, not firing them for not coming to work, but if we can furlough them and, once this is all over, bring them back. I guess that's up for you, Jim.
Sorry, Mr. Duran, I was trying to muffle the sounds of barking dogs. The answer is yes, you can. I mean, yes, you can. You can furlough them, and yes, in that event, they will be eligible for unemployment. But then I understand that may be more beneficial to them than requiring them to come to work with heightened anxiety at this time in this very weird situation that we're in. But that's a policy decision for council and for your administration. Legally, yes, you can do that.
Ms. Villalobos?
So I was going to propose something similar to what Mr. Duran was saying. We're living in times where this has never happened before. Number one, everybody's trying to do the best that they can, but let's keep in mind, this is a deadly disease. And some people would prefer to lose their job versus their life. So how are we going to make it better for them? And it's not an easy task. I don't have an answer for it. I think we're all a little lost, including, I think our president, when it comes to this. And I certainly don't think that tonight is going to be the night where we put all this together. I think we need Jim to do a little bit of more research and find a common ground. If we're going to pay them, then can they do some of that work at home? If they're doing it at home, can they log on? Is there a way of them logging on, of us tracking them, or tracking their time, that kind of stuff? So I think we need to brainstorm this one before we just run and vote on it.
Mayor?
Mr. Martinez?
Yes, ma'am. Mayor and council, and I'm how do I say this? I'm very conscious. I don't want to go beyond my lane. My legal advice is trying to be limited to the employment laws that apply, particularly the most recent ones, but also the structure of the government, which is council makes policy decisions, your administration does the operational stuff day to day. And my very gentle point with that is, I think I would just encourage council to be conscious of your administration's role and your city manager's role. She's the city manager. She runs all the personnel, ultimately report to her and her alone. And she's in charge with getting performance out of them. And council's role is to assess her performance by that. Yes, I'm not obtuse. I get that if it's a matter of expending public funds for employees who are not performing work at the usual workplace, that probably rises to the level of a policy decision. But even then, I think I would encourage council, you may still want to be deferential and maybe give her some options and say, look, here, we're comfortable if you do this, but we're not requiring it you run the operations the way you think you need to, perhaps with this expanded latitude, knowing the council would be amenable to certain expenditures in certain situations.
Mr. Perez?
I thank you, Jim. I was just about to say that in terms of we don't want to be in a situation where we're micromanaging Adriana's role in the human resources aspect of it. She's well aware of what the parameters are. I believe she's well aware of the do's and the don'ts. And so I don't think that I would be comfortable in saying that, or I am comfortable in saying that I trust her in making the decision that will be beneficial, mutually beneficial for the city and for the employee. Obviously, health comes first, because if we don't have healthy employees, they're not going to be able to function appropriately at the work site. So I think that if we can treat it as on a case basis, I feel confident that administration will know what to do in situations. I know that I believe that they will be clear in communicating their expectations to the employees, and then it's our part. Once, if anything goes beyond that, like to Jim's point, then it's at that point it becomes our function to examine that. But that's on a case by case basis.
I just wanted to add to you all, like, again, this is something new, and I know that, you know, you're probably asking yourselves, why aren't they being asked to go see their primary doctor or the hospital? I don't know if anybody's visited the hospital lately, or I mean, it's not an easy way to just go in and get seen. Plus, you're hearing all these news saying that these medical care facilities are being overwhelmed. We have not seen our peak. So we don't want to be participating in that frantic. And that's just my take. And that's the reason why I come to you all for guidance. There's challenges, and there's challenges every day. And I think that every employee is going to be held accountable for their actions. And this is a time where I know who my stars are and I know who are not. But again, everybody acts different in different types of situation. Everybody has a different living condition than other people. All we're trying to do is make sure that we stay within compliance, the less liability that we can give to the city, because I mean, whatever which way we go, it's unprecedented time. So we can do something and someone's not gonna agree with it or disagree. So we're just trying to present as staff. I think that the attorneys and I have worked something that will allow and clear us from liability and make sure that we can continue, number one, providing the community services, because that's the most important thing, is that the community still needs a person to answer the other line to let them know that everything is okay, that we're still here to make sure that their concerns are being listened to and that we're trying to address them as fast as we can. But it is posing a challenge, and that's why we're here, is just trying to gather direction if this is something that you're all willing to do. If it's not, we can go back, draft something different from you all. But again, is what we don't want to create is that frantic, everybody visiting the doctor, exposing them, I feel, a little bit more than what we're already being exposed to.
Mr. Perez?
And yeah, maybe you all have already discussed this, I'm not sure. With regard to, for example, clerical staff, you know, and you mentioned about answering phones and those kinds of things. Would it be possible to have, for example, and because she's the first one that I always see coming in, Norma, right, in the front office, giving her a city phone and lending her city phone, and then, for example, forwarding the calls from this office to that city phone so that she is able to work from her home and be able to, you know, direct people or put them in contact. Maybe she won't have the same capabilities of connecting people, but certainly giving her that mobility of being able to stay at home and work. And again, that's just an example. And
Correct.
you may have already thought about that stuff.
Well, and like with Norma, she wasn't home. She wasn't considered essential because we can still answer the phones. Since we did close the lobbies, I tried to send as many people as I could home, but still being able to provide the service, so that we have the capabilities that the phone rings in the back and any of us that are working back there can pick up. We're posting in front of our offices. I know that Victor's team, I mean, they just had a food drive on Saturday and only 4 of them worked, and we served over 345 food baskets for the community. So, I mean, we're still trying to provide a service, but not everyone is needed right now because the level of calls that we're getting is less. I can't send a laborer home and ask him to work from home.
Right.
They
And
have
again,
nothing to,
I'm
other
just,
than clean your own yard
when
if you
it's
live in the
reasonable.
city of Socorro. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Perez.
No, it was just, and I understand that, just when it's reasonable, obviously.
And like also another example, like the planning and zoning department, we can forward the number, but it can only be to one phone. So right now, the person that's receiving the calls from planning and zoning is Mr. Terrazas. Right? So then he sends out emails to other staff members, depending on what the need is. But right now, since we are not open to the public, we're hoping that that department will be open with more accessibility starting on Monday. But that just all depends. Tomorrow I do my checkups with the employees, and I think one employee is ready to come back, depending on what conversation I have with him tomorrow. But I mean, we're just kind of working as we go. I mean, it's just a daily, we have employees calling and saying, my throat is feeling itchy, go ahead and stay home. The next day, you know what, I think it was just allergies, I'm not feeling anything. Come in, make sure that you practice your social distancing. It's just every employee and every individual is different. So we just want to make sure that we are listening to our employees and that we're also being responsible with public funds. But at the same time, again, this is something new, and we're kind of working as we go. And I know that it makes some employees act differently because they're under stress for many reasons. Maybe their spouse is no longer working. I just don't know. But every individual is different. And those are just challenges that we are trying to address on a daily.
Ms. Villalobos?
Ms. Rodarte, I have no concerns that you're trying to do the best that you guys can with this situation right here. And what is your take on number 16? I'm a little confused of how everybody feels about number 16. Because Mr. Nevares, it was your item, and so what came about this item? If you could give me a little bit of background.
Well, it came about the fact that you have these local grocery stores like the Food King. Well, to give you a better example, there's the little mercadito here nearby my home, and they've posted on the front door a limit of 5 people at a time. I went in there yesterday, and I'm outside waiting. I'm assuming folks are following the rules, but I didn't see anybody come out. I walk in, and there's more than 20 in there. And these are folks that are gathered very close to each other. You go to the gas station. I go every morning, and I gas up, and same thing. There's no limit of who's going in, who's coming out, how many are in the store. And that in itself is a huge concern. We went from 50 infected folks were mentioned on the news last night to 75 right now. It was 68 this morning, and then an additional. So it's rapidly flowing, and these folks are not keeping their distance. And that in itself was why I needed 16 on here. Just the social distancing in itself, and these small businesses that are really not implementing these rules. You're 6 feet apart. I know they're interested in selling and running their business. But then again, additional rules were implemented today regarding that. Parks have now closed. So what makes a Food King, let's say, okay to have 50, 60 people in there? If it's not being enforced, if no one's looking at, really, are we keeping our distance? Are we protecting our cashiers? Stuff like that.
Mayor, and I just want to add this agenda item was created last Thursday. And as we all know, things are changing rapidly. As of today, those are being enforced. I just heard yesterday at the King, there was like a huge line outside because not everybody's being allowed inside. So I know that things are changing, and maybe with the governor's order, we can we can actually enforce it full force here in the city. But I think when it was created, people were not listening. Business owners did not want to close. I mean, I've got multiple phone calls where business owners, I mean, it's posted and they're still wanting to run their business. I mean, it financially impacts them, and I understand that. But at the same time, my response to them is we just have to be responsible. And the sooner we comply, the sooner we'll get through this.
Mayor?
Mr. Martinez?
Yes, ma'am. Mayor and Council, I would simply offer this. Council does have the authority to enact restrictive measures like you're discussing. Legally, I would ask Council to consider two things. One thing that should definitely do, one thing that should consider. The consideration item is this. Just be conscious, do you want a third order like this in effect in the county? There are already two. That's not the case in other larger metro areas. There are some larger metro areas where the big city in the county deferred and said, look, we'll let the county order handle it. It has everything we want. We coordinated it. That's fine. My point is the city has the authority to do that. So does the county. The city of El Paso has its own order. The county has its order. If the city of El Paso did nothing, the county of El Paso's order would still apply throughout the county, including it throughout the city of El Paso. But the city, being the largest city, obviously took the initiative to pass its own order. And my only point is, if you enact your own order, which again the city has the right to do, you may cause confusion. There will be some citizens who, for whatever reason, have to go from Socorro to El Paso, and in the course of that may go through an unincorporated area, and you'll have them asking legitimately, well, what are the differences between the three orders, and what do I need to do differently depending on where I'm at? So just something to consider. Number two, if you do adopt an order, I would certainly urge council not to do it today. We haven't published an ordinance. Okay, we're riding on council's emergency ordinance authority, which is very rarely used. Obviously, this is one of those rare times where cities around the state are using it. But nonetheless, even for emergency ordinances, before you adopt one, we're supposed to publish it. You can publish it very briefly, very shortly before the meeting, but nonetheless, you should publish it. And so my point is, this is on to give council on the agenda, to give council an opportunity to discuss it, and maybe more importantly, give us and your administration some instruction, so that if you wanted to enact an ordinance, my suggestion would be, give us the instruction and the terms of what the ordinance should be, but don't adopt it today. Let us go back and draft it, and then we'll provide or notice of it at another regular or even an emergency meeting where the council can adopt it.
I agree.
Ms. Villalobos?
I completely agree, Jim. Thank you so much for that. I was about to ask that. And I seriously would ask council to consider doing the right thing. Don't matter who's doing what, for us to do the right thing. If we have to be the leaders, then let's be the leaders, but let's protect our people. I was at Albertsons on the west side today, and it was full of people. And maybe 5 or 6 of us had gloves and masks And thank God that Albertsons is wiping down all their shopping carts. They have 2 people wiping down their shopping carts, and then they're handing them over to you.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. There was tons of people, and of course, I have allergies, so I cough, and of course, other people are coughing, and I don't know why they're coughing. And so I just think this should be a different meeting, and this should be a different meeting, and we should definitely be the leaders in it, because nobody's taking this seriously. We need to protect our citizens. If they want to go somewhere else, and it didn't happen here.
Mayor.
Mr. Perez?
The existing proclamations or orders from the county, doesn't that include, the fines and those kinds of things already? I guess my point is we can already enforce those things without having to create anything new. And to Jim's point, I don't know if, and again, I'm not sure if we really need to do number 16, because if it already exists, then it's a matter of just implementing and enforcing on our end.
Yeah.
That's just a question.
And like Adriana mentioned, this was created last week, and as you know, things are changing daily. So, and with the notifications yesterday, I agree. I totally agree with you guys.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Just to clarify, Jim, the only reason why there's 2 is because the county, actually the county has all the full authority, but the thing is that they have into a local agreement with El Paso, because they have the health department in El Paso instead of the county. So therefore, that's why there's 2, and that's why they talk to each other to implement it on both. But other than that, in other counties, it's just the county who says so. It's just that simple. Now,
yes, sir. I think that is true, that the county, the health department is sort of jointly run and jointly funded by the city and the county. The city pays the lion's share of it.
Yep.
And let me say one other thing. I think Mr. Perez touched on this, or to answer something Mr. Perez asked. Yes, the county judge's order is in effect right now. And for example, controlling the number of people in particular buildings or other areas without any additional authority, without any ordinance, I think the city of Socorro is perfectly within its rights to send code enforcement personnel or PD or others to pick your building, a food king, and say, look, the county judge has ordered 6 feet of separation between people. We're looking in and just eyeballing it, and we can tell you're not maintaining that. We're going to stand outside and limit it to say 20 people or 25 people inside at any one time. I think you could do that without any additional action.
And just to what I was going to say is that we also have authority, some leeway, not a whole lot. I mean, we can't really just go out there and then do it our own and then have a difference of ordinances, that are going to contradict the county. That I do know. But what I do know is that we need to enforce all the rules. And unfortunately, there are some businesses that aren't following. I agree with Mr. Nevares, because this was something that was brought into the agenda last week. And yes, the Food King, my God, man, people were lined up almost all to the end of the aisles. So, if we're going to talk about, our citizens aren't following the rules. Our businesses aren't following the rules either. So we need to put our foot down and really go out to these businesses. And if you're not essential, you need to close down. It's painful as it is. How can you put a price on your parents' life or your grandparents' life or your tío or your tía or your grandma or your grandpa? That's somebody else's relative that you're putting in harm's way. So really, we have to, as a community, have to band together to see this through to the end. But if we are not following the rules as a community, I think that we, the city, has to enforce the rules. And I think that's what Mr. Nevada's intent was. And I totally agree. We as a city have all the authority to do this. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to pressure the small businesses that are not obeying. And if you're not essential, you should not be opening your doors for business.
Ms. Villalobos?
Again, really strongly believe that, and Mr. Martinez, I appreciate everything that you tell us and how you guide us, but I don't care what confusion anybody's under. This is serious. We can't come back from this. We cannot come back from this. Take it seriously. Let's do what we need to do to protect our people, and let's make some noise if we have to. But we need to protect our people. Ms. Rodarte, my question to you is, if we decide to move forward on something like this, how many personnel do you count going business to business to try to enforce?
Correct. So again, our police department is limited, but we do have 30 officers right now that are currently out on the streets. I do have Chief on the line, and he's kind of jumping at me, and his comments are, ma'am, there is no occupancy language in the county order, and we are enforcing the rules. 2 businesses today, 2 yesterday for Food King, that is. Even the city language today talks about capacity where feasible in the grocery stores. We are conducting business patrols on each shift. And he is able to join in if we call him out. So Chief Burton, are you here?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here. Mayor, Council, Chief David Burton for City of Socorro Police Department. Just so you're aware of the county and the city orders. So neither one of those talks about a must when it comes to capacity in a grocery store. It talks about, in fact, the city ordinance, which is more restricted as of yesterday, talks about where feasible and that social distancing should be maintained. But the language basically leaves it up to the consumer and or the business to sort out. It's not a enforceable order, as it were, where we could give a fine today. That being said, we have been closing down smaller businesses. We went to 2 of the car washes today, actually, and we have closed down some of the food products that were being sold out of the back of vehicles where it was non-permitted type individuals. Also, a retail store which was not selling food, we closed that down, and there was a hair salon that we had to go and check on from a complaint that we received from a resident. So it's not that we aren't out there doing it. As a matter of fact, since this weekend, all of the patrol ships are under mandate to do business checks while they're out and about. So that's what we're doing for enforcement. But I have to go by what the legal language is in the county order presently, and that still stipulates that grocery stores are considered essential, and therefore they don't have some of the restrictive language that some of the other businesses do.
Thank you, Chief. So,
Mayor, so will we have 2 different motions, one for 14 and one for 16?
Yes, you probably should.
So I want to go back to 14 because I think it's 2 different things that we're discussing. Back to the sick leave. I don't know if you all are comfortable already making a motion for 16 before we move on to 14, back to 14?
Well, at this time, we could, who did the motion for 16? If we could just, okay, if we could just, because we're already enforcing it.
Right.
So we could just delete it, but I mean, if you want, Mr. Nevares.
are you
I do.
talking about 14 or 16?
16.
Okay, Ms. Rodarte, were you talking about 14?
No, I wanted to move back to 14, but I was asking if you guys were ready to make a motion for 16 before
Okay.
we go back to 14.
Okay, gotcha.
That way we don't go back to 14 and then we come back to 16 again.
Mayor,
Mr. Martinez?
yes, ma'am, let me offer one final thought on number 16. And I realize I'm doing it now because I realize I've talked with a couple of you, but not all of you since this issue arose. please be aware, the Texas Government Code is what gives the mayor and ultimately council the authority to do the things we're talking about, to evacuate an area of the city, to try to mitigate a disaster, and to control occupancy of dwellings and ingress and egress from certain areas. So these are the very things we're talking about. And interestingly, the government code says either the mayor can do it or the county judge can do it. And then the rest of the governing body has to approve that within a certain time. But it also says in the event of a conflict between the two, the county judge's decision controls, which is why I think you've seen in some of these other large cities, that's part of the reason that some of even the very large cities have said, look, we've coordinated, but the county judge has that authority anyway, I defer to them. So it brings up an interesting issue. The city of Socorro could probably do some things that are different from the county judge's order. And we could say legitimately, that doesn't really conflict with the order. But the lick log, the rubber's gonna meet the road where we do something that's different enough to be deemed a conflict with the county judge's order, in which case it would have no effect. That's a potential quagmire I want you to be aware of.
So I think we should just, I think we do have the ability to set a limit on individuals that going in so that they can obey the 6 feet. You know, if he says, oh, okay, well, you know, they can stay open, but I mean, we can set rules and
Right.
parameters for them to stay open to obey the 6 feet rule that is in place. So, I mean, I think that we're able to. I think that Ms. Villalobos touched on that, you know, if the county doesn't go that far, we can. It just doesn't say it's not conflicting because this is something added to what they're already added to. And we as a city have that authority as well. And just for you, Jim, that's on TML update number 11 that you read about.
I saw that, and that's part of the reason. And to be fair, I think you and I talked about this before that update came out. I think that's the case as well. And I was a little relieved when I saw at least someone at TML had the same opinion. Again, we're kind of out on the edge of the envelope here. I think that's the case. I think that's a reasonable position. I would perhaps obviously suggest maybe invite some input from the experts like your planning and zoning folks to say, hey, look, in a building of X number of square feet, where we think an average of 30% of it is already occupied by fixtures and inventory, how many people can occupy that at any one time and still maintain a 6-foot distance? I don't know what that answer is, but I'm confident other people know more about it than I would, but that's at least something to consider.
Mr. Nevarez, would you consider the motion to stand, but with giving leeway to our city manager to come to approve the item so that our city manager can get staff to look into what Jim just said about having adequate enough numbers so that they won't surpass the 6 feet, and then the staff will disseminate that without bringing it back to council?
I do.
Second.
I think you'd still need to get it back to council. I would suggest in that event, a motion to instruct staff to develop a proposed ordinance given the parameters council has discussed. And then I think we can either bring it back as an emergency ordinance at the next meeting, or at another emergency meeting or the next regular meeting.
Mr. Perez?
I think that nationally, those parameters have already been set. I think that that if we can instruct staff, but again, Mr. Nevarez, I'm not going to tell you how to do your motion, but maybe looking at what the national recommendation is, and then allowing us to go ahead and proceed with enforcement of those, adding that to our language. So we're not doing anything.
That is the national recommendation, 6 feet apart.
Right, but you know, just as far as I'm not sure there's other things in, I guess my suggestion is just for them to review what has been posted so that we can, you know, just make sure that we're consistent with what the national recommendations are.
Ms. Villalobos?
So real quick, Mr. Bettis touched on something that I think we all know that the state has already and the county have already put in place. Is there anything else that we need to put in place? And Mr. Martinez, I'm sorry, that's one question. Mr. Martinez, second question is Mr. Bettis correct? But I think I heard Chief say that it applied only to the smaller businesses and not the businesses, well, not the smaller business, I'm sorry, the essential and the non-essential. And I think that's where we're getting everything confused.
Yeah, he brings up a good point, and I have both the county order, the city order, the latest amendments that were issued yesterday, and then the governor's order from the day before. Yes, there is some aspirational language almost. It says, look, here are the standards for non-essential businesses. Here's what's exempted from that prohibition, everybody that is an essential business. And then there's even a qualification within that says, you know, here's what you have to maintain for essential businesses, but to the extent it's feasible. Look, there's plenty of wiggle room. But a lot of that is exactly why I got to this conclusion. Look, the standard seems to be, if you're an essential business, we still want you to take certain precautions like staying 6 feet apart. And I still think that gives the city the opportunity to say, look, if you have a 20,000 square foot business, here's how many people we're going to permit to go in at any one time. I think you could do that now. I think it'd be safer to do that based on the city's own ordinance. And all I'm suggesting is if you do that, then yes, maybe look to national standards or some other standards for how we're determining occupancy of buildings in this restricted area.
Mr. Duran?
I think Mr. Bettis is right. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. I mean, the standards are already there by the state and by the county. We just need to figure out how many people each of those buildings can hold. And I don't think we need to have an ordinance for that. I just think we need to let staff go, you know, like planning and zoning, go in there, it's so many square feet, and then just have them enforce the law or the rules that are already in place by the county.
Well, and I'd like to add that I think that there's already plenty of rules out there and guidelines. And I think that the issue more than anything is enforcement. We already have a lot of rules that are not being enforced. So I think we need to first enforce what's already out there. And if that still doesn't work, then we can always add the item for the next agenda. And at that time, look to see if we need to add anything else. Because like everybody else mentioned, things are changing on a daily basis. This was posted last week and there's already new guidelines. So I think instead of trying to reinvent the wheel and confuse people even further, we need to enforce what's already on there, but still, just to be on the safe side, add the item to the agenda so that at that point we can discuss if we need to add anything further. Ms. Villalobos?
I don't think for the next meeting, because the next meeting is 2 weeks away, that could mean a lot of people infected. And I think if we need to meet again, we make it an emergency meeting in order to address the issues.
Mr. Duran?
I agree with Ms. Villalobos. If our infection rate starts to go up in Socorro, then I think we need to address how those are going to impact our city. Every city is different. If we have our numbers are starting to double on a daily basis, we need to take action on things that are going to stop the replication of this virus in our citizens. So I think we do need to reserve to have an emergency meeting, but I think it needs to be on the basis of how many and how the virus is spreading in our community. So, I'm just saying we need to revisit this when our next meeting is, and we need to enforce the rules that we already have in place to stop the spread. And then if the spread, if it's starting to spread in our community, then we need to probably look and take additional measures to stop that spread.
There,
Mr. Rodriguez?
you know, it's fine and dandy when you guys want to have this meeting and bring it up again, and then we'll have a discussion. Why are we going to be reactive? Why can't we be proactive and move on this? We already have 4 cases here in City of Socorro. It's unfortunate. Like I said, yeah, the 6 feet. Wow. So people don't obey. People don't obey. So you mean to tell me that you want more cases here in the city before we act on an ordinance? I think that that is very irresponsible of us if we want to go that route. All I'm saying is people do not obey. We need to go in these places of business. We need to look at how many is capacity, because you can let 40 people and just say, oh, I just want 6 people at a time. But what about the people that are walking down the aisles? How many are there in there? You see, those are the issues. You're gonna be, that aisle is only about 4.5 to 5 feet apart. You're gonna be in somebody else's way. So like I said, we need to take a proactive stance and not a reactive. And that's what, if we postpone it for another meeting, then that's what we're going to do. And next time, you know, God forbid, there might be 6 cases or 7 cases. If that's what we're looking for.
Mr. Duran?
I think you misunderstood. We have the rules in place. We do need to enforce them. That's being proactive. Being, you know, reactive is after the fact. It's here. We have the rules in place. Let's get out there and let's get them enforced. The ones that we have in place, which should more than adequate keep with the guidelines that the CDC and everybody else is promoting. 6 feet apart, you know, and then no large gatherings, everything that the county said. Shut down the parks and have our police department, our code enforcement, and all of them out there making sure that the rules that are in place are being followed. That is what I'm saying. And, you know, if we have to go with stricter rules than what the county has come out with, then at that point, we should have another meeting and figure out.
Okay, so when is it? After we get more cases? That's what you're saying? After we get more cases?
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is right now we have the tools.
No, we don't.
We're not using
them. All we need to do, look, the 6 feet applies. Yes, I get it. Nobody obeys it. But it doesn't deter from people going into our grocery stores and putting in 30 to 40 people in there.
That's
goes
what
back to say,
planning
when
and
they're
zoning
walking down the
go in
aisles,
there.
when they're walking down the aisles.
Excuse me, Mr. Rodriguez, I do have the floor. That's why planning and zoning will go in there and figure out how many people can be in there.
We need an ordinance.
We're not posted for an ordinance, so that's what we
This
direct staff for the
item,
ordinance.
agenda item, Mayor, this agenda item is for that. We can direct staff to do an ordinance, okay? Why are we going to postpone it? So that we can get more cases and then what? Oh, City of Socorro could have done something last week, but they decided not to.
Well, we can always just shut the city down.
Mr. Perez?
That is not the answer. The
Yes,
answer
Mayor,
is
I've been holding
using what
my
we
hand
have
up a couple of
in
times.
place.
Go ahead, Ms. Cielo.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Perez. Go ahead, Mr.
No, I thank you. I just, if I understood Chief correctly, they are already doing that. They're already going out and they're already closing down the non-essential businesses. Now, in terms of, I'll be really honest with you. If we can go ahead and maybe add more, I don't know how much more teeth we can do, add, but I would certainly, and to Jim's point, I would have liked for staff to come together, because it's not just, we can have 1,001 ordinances, but if logistically we can't enforce them, then why have them on the book? So the same, and I think that's where we need to have in that discussion, the chief, the planning and zoning, to be able to see what is doable. No, we're not being reactive. It's just that we need to have a thoughtful ordinance that will address the issue, and also in terms of coming back, and it's not being reactive. I think that calling an emergency meeting, we have that power for that same reason, to call an emergency meeting, and it's not being reactive. This is something that is timely, but the thing is that I don't think that we have we need more time in terms of this meeting, more than this meeting, obviously, to be able to hash out the logistics of enforcement. Again, we can have all the ordinances in the book, but if we can't enforce them, then it does us no good either.
Ms. Villalobos?
I'm torn between Mr. Perez and everyone else here. I'm the type that you need to nip it now. You need to nip it now. I agree with Mr. Rodriguez regarding we have to do more. We do have to do more. What's happening here is not enough. It's not enough. People are not taking it seriously. And I don't know if Chief is still on there, but have you find any of these? One of my questions is, have you find any of these businesses? Number two, I'm going to give you a quick example. There was a death in the family, and none of us could attend except maybe they said 10, but when the 10 got there, 3 were sent home because there was 3 employees already in the building of the funeral home. So we're not even taking into consideration how many employees are inside. So nobody's thinking of that. And so when they say 20 people and there's already 15 employees, then that means 5 people inside. And so I think Mr. Perez, you're right. We probably need to come back and iron this out, because I don't think we have enough right now in front of us to make a not an informed, but a good choice. Go ahead.
I just want to make sure that we're not overstretching our capabilities either in terms of police protection. Again, I am totally for enforcement. Obviously, I'm totally for making sure that we nip this as much as possible in the bud, where that we can, as much as we can do it. But in terms of developing an ordinance, we need to have our department heads, particularly Adriana, Chief, and Mr. Medina, along with Joe, to see what we can do logistically, because we can come back. I have no problem in having an emergency meeting, and once this ordinance is drafted, let's go ahead and do it. But we need to make sure that, because another thing is, why create an ordinance if we can't enforce it? That's all I'm saying.
Mayor, I do have Chief on the line that wants to say something.
Right, Council, Chief David Burton again. So to go back, we are enforcing this. That's come up a couple of times as far as we're not enforcing, but we are. Our main goal is compliance, right? As City Manager pointed out, and the rest of you, this is unprecedented, especially for police to even be involved in this kind of activity.
Chief, I'm sorry, you're breaking up.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
Okay. How's this? So this is unprecedented. So we are going for compliance first. Now, what we are doing is we're recording each time that we go to a business, so that we have it as part of our computer record, so that then if we revisit it, then we can find at that time, and it gives us history to go back to. In other words, we have a date and time that we came and gave you a copy of county order. So therefore, you cannot say that you didn't know. That's the approach that we're taking presently. To date, no, we have not fined. We have closed businesses, but we have not fined them. County language, again, the county language as it does not add capacity or talk about capacity regarding essential businesses, okay, especially the grocery stores. If you wanted to take action on that, it would have to be a occupancy type language, and we would fine based on that. Now, I would suggest that you not reinvent the wheel. If you go on El Paso Strong, there is the current health order for the city. The city has additional language that addresses some of the concerns the county didn't address, such as food trucks. This weekend, we closed down a food truck, and the city addressed that. I would suggest that you go back, look, because this is part. That would be a good idea if they close open spaces. It addresses any size gathering, which again, I think that's reasonable. So I would suggest that you not reinvent the wheel, that you look at the El Paso city ordinance, because all they did was take the county and add to it, and you can see the pieces that they put in because they've actually bolded it, so you can actually read what the additional language is. And then if Socorro wanted to go a little bit further than that and talk about occupancy, I mean, it's only one thing that we have to add as far as language is concerned. And that's it. Thank you.
This is tough. It's tough, but it's important.
Do we have a motion then for 16?
Mr. Nevares had the motion.
Yes. I say let's enforce what we can based on available information and what the county is doing, what the city is doing. But we just need to enforce it now.
Second.
So we're deleting the previous, or you're amending your previous motion, Mr. Nevares?
Amending it from what now? What was the previous?
You're amending your previous motion, which was to approve and have an ordinance drawn?
Well, like the chief said, if we're already implementing some of these, we should just continue. But the small businesses is what I'm worried about.
Mr. Perez?
Very
And
quickly.
those are the ones that need to.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think that, Nevares, I think we can do both things. Continue the enforcement as stated in the county order, but then also instruct staff to develop an ordinance that mirrors the city of El Paso, so that in to Jim's point about confusion, we're talking the same language between cities. And so I think that we can do. I think that your motion could include both the continued enforcement, obviously. Then and Chief has spoken to that, but also to look at what the city of El Paso has done relative to putting more teeth into their order.
Yes.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Rodriguez, right?
Right.
Yes.
Rene Rodriguez,
Aye.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Ralph Duran,
Yes.
Victor Perez,
Aye.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos.
And just for those that are listening right now, what we're incorporating right now is following the county plus the city and following those ordinances that are already in place, correct? Okay, yes.
And then we're back to discussing item number 14.
I think it was my motion on the floor or not. Like, I don't remember.
It was.
We had a previous motion made by Mr. Perez to approve item number 14, and then you amended it to discuss items 14 and 16.
Okay, so then at this time, I'd like to go ahead and renew my motion to approve.
Mayor,
Second.
Which is what does this ordinance do?
This would be this is not so much ordinances, but this is the policies
Correct.
for HR.
So this is a sick leave policy and also the essential staff that we're asking for, that we talked about earlier. I wanted to mention that the Families First Coronavirus Response Act is a federal law. It does talk about employees providing with a minimum of 80 hours, depending on the reason of why. If you look at the actual policy, and this is part of the law, is that purposes leave can be taken is to care for the employee's child whose school has been closed because of the coronavirus. That affects most employees, but there's some that are still coming to work regardless of the stipulation that their kids are at home. And we all know we don't need verification for that because we know that all schools are closed right now until further notice. For this school year, they're done.
So how long is this for?
I'm sorry?
How long is this for?
As long as we are the disaster is in place, we have language saying that it's only for this instance and until the declaration of the disaster is in effect.
Okay.
Second.
Rene Rodriguez,
Aye.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Ralph Duran,
Yes.
Victor Perez,
Aye.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos.
Yes.
Item number 15, discussion and action to authorize the city manager to make emergency purchases of goods and services necessary to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and to establish conditions and limitations on those purchases and reporting procedures for same.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Ms. Rodarte, can you give us a little background?
This is an item for Mr. Rodriguez.
Yes.
And
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize.
So the only thing that I know that I like the disinfecting of the sanitation of departments, we had to increase those. Like for the police department, we have them coming in on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And those aren't cheap services. It's about 900, 400, depending on the building that they're doing, but it just provides peace of mind to our officers, to our public works department. So we're trying to do it with every department that's open at least 3 times a week, if not twice. And I
And
know that's
the
an
reason-
expense that we weren't planning on. Also the purchases of laptops and things that we have to purchase just to make sure that we keep afloat based on the circumstances that we are in right now.
Mayor.
Mr. Rodriguez?
To add to that, Ms. Rodarte is correct. Think about what we're doing right now. We're having a meeting at our home. We got new laptops because some of us didn't have them, and they're the ones we have. They're outdated. It couldn't sustain the width band of having this meeting be possible. These are purchases that needed to be taken because of the disaster that we're in. I believe that we should give our city manager the leeway. Of course, any expenditure she does will be under the COVID-19 so that we can get reimbursed by the federal government. We should not put, or hinder the ability for her to go out and clean the facilities of our men and women from the police department that are out there. Because they are in contact with our public. So these are issues that we need to address. And if we're gonna wait every 2 weeks to approve something, then that's a possibility of somebody getting contacted or affected and then going to our facility and affecting others. So this is something that I would love for us to approve. And as you all know, as long as the purchases are made, services that are rendered will be classified as COVID-19, and the federal government should and possibly would reimburse us for all of the purchases. So this is something that, because she is out there every day, and she knows what the city needs, I think that we should give her that leeway. We know that she's always very good at bringing us all of the expenditures. So we need to do this so that she can provide all the services for our staff.
Mayor and Council, and I want to add that these decisions aren't only made by me. I have a staff. Mr. Casiano is great. He always keeps me in line and says, no. kind of let's revisit. But I think that I never make the decision, and I will never misuse and we can always place an item on the agenda to ratify, meaning I can't wait the 2 weeks, but I'll bring it to council if there's a purchase outside of our budget that for you all to ratify and give me permission after the expenditure has been done in case of an emergency. But I will always act within our budget that we are budgeted for right now. In case there's an emergency, I'll bring it immediately to council.
Okay.
Mayor?
Mr. Martinez?
Yes, ma'am. Mayor and council. I'm sure most of you will recall from time to time, we have discussed giving the city manager standing purchasing authority for sundry reasons. I don't think we've never really taken action. I've never gotten specific direction, but that is the standard across the state. The city managers of every municipality of any size have what they call standing authority, and the rule is just if it's below that number, don't bring it to council. We're involved with policy only. Just report it to us at some point. Okay, this isn't that item. This is a subset of that item. This is just for emergency purchases related to this particular pandemic. My suggestion to council would be if council's inclined to approve it, I would set a limit, a dollar limit, just an absolute dollar amount beyond which the purchase cannot be made. Another requirement probably needs to be that there isn't enough time to procure the services or the product before the next meeting. And then a reporting requirement within X number of days or weeks, the information has to be transmitted to council.
Mr. Perez?
I think that, and I don't know how you all would feel, maybe a limit of $5,000, because, for example, I'm just thinking of the purchase of the laptops. I mean, that depending on if we hadn't gotten a good price on them, it could have been a purchase up to that point. So I think that personally, I think a $5,000 limit would be good, and I have confidence in the administration that they would be judicious in their exercising their authority within that.
Mr. Duran?
I think she already has a $5,000 limit. I think we need to bump it up to 10,000 because sometimes things can happen, and like you say, she don't have the time to come to council, and this way we won't wait because I think she's already at 5,000. I think we should bump it up to 10,000.
Was that the amount? I'm sorry, I just didn't remember the amount.
Let me just clarify. We have a budget that we approve every year. We make expenditures higher than what you all are setting right now, because we have to follow procurement process. What emergency? So I think it's not the authority power. It's just something that we're not budgeted for. Right? Like right now we have emergency aid. I think every department has $5,000, $7,000.
Okay.
And this is where we're coding all of this, right? But I think that if we're budgeted for it, because I don't want you to think that I only have $5,000 that I can spend, because we do spend our budget in 1 year. So we, every department, it goes through my approval and we follow the procurement processes. These are just purchases that we weren't budgeted for.
So
that
then
you're
may I
giving
ask,
me the authority.
what would be your recommendation in terms of an emergency situation that you would need that authority?
That actually would be a hard number to tell you. I mean, what if like in a flood season we have equipment that breaks down? Sometimes we have to make purchases to purchase equipment. I mean, and that's just going overboard. But like I said, I don't know what number to recommend, honestly.
So are we talking about maybe because I know that our people are going to want a cap, but if there's a need, I think that I don't know. I don't know how to quantify that. I don't know how we would be able to say. I mean, I have trust that you would make the appropriate purchases. So then we wouldn't need a cap or a dollar amount.
What we can do is, so right now everything over $50,000 has to come to council regardless in order for you to award. I think that any emergency that would cost over $50,000, I wouldn't even feel comfortable making that decision on my own. But sometimes, I mean, as we all know, $10,000 when something, an emergency equipment goes down, or, I mean, $10,000 is really not significant to even do anything. I think anything over 50,000 should come to council regardless.
Okay.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. She already has that ability to do
Right.
it under $49,999.99. So I think that we should just say, hey, we're just gonna give you the ability because of the emergency, that I think that we should just give her what she normally does in the regular policy, which is the $49,999.99. And then we'll just leave it at that. If she has to make some purchases higher than that, then you just bring it to us. But it's very essential because anything in the medical right now is so expensive for cleaning services and stuff like that. And as more facilities are using these, they're gonna hire prices because that's all they do. For example, if you go to Saneli meat market, you're buying eggs for $4.51 when you can go to Walmart and buy them for $2.41. So the milk, the carton of milk is like $4, and over here it's only like $2 something. So there are price gouging in the areas. You know, we don't want to say that the medical field or the medical, services are going to be like that, but I mean, they are kind of steep. I think that we should just give her what we already gave her in the policy.
So then, if I may, Mr. Rodriguez, Madam Mayor, I'd like to go ahead and restate my motion then, to go ahead and allow the city manager to have the buying authority or purchasing authority to not to exceed $49,999.99.
Second.
Ms. Villalobos?
Well, I was just gonna say we were getting off topic, Mr. Jim, because quite frankly, we were supposed to be talking about just this item regarding the COVID-19 and not any purchases off of any other emergency. So, and I was going to bring up that I thought we had a limit of $50,000, and I wanted to ask Mrs. Rodarte how she felt about it, but all that has been answered. Thank you.
Mayor,
So-
we have a speaker for this item, Miriam Cruz.
Ms. Cruz,
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure the rules say that I can speak right before the voting is gonna happen.
that what, I'm sorry?
But I'm pretty sure the rules state that I'm to speak right before the vote is to take place. And I
We
don't, it
haven't-
doesn't seem like the vote is about to take place.
Maybe, I think she means before
haven't
we
voted yet.
Ms.
make a
Cruz, we haven't
motion.
voted yet.
I know, and I'm supposed to speak right before you vote,
So,
not in the middle of you guys going back and forth.
But we're not voting yet.
We're getting ready to vote. That's why they're calling you to speak, ma'am.
All right, well, my concern about this item was based on, not having a lot of information on here, but the main concern was, I guess something that Ms. Rodarte spoke to, which was the limit of the amount that, the emergency purchases that were going to happen. So she's saying that you're not going to go over the budget that's already been established. That was really my main concern. Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Perez?
So then, to Ms. Colombia Lobos' point number 14, that we're still on. No, I apologize. Mentira. I apologize. Never mind. I had a senior moment. Never mind.
Welcome to my world.
No, that's, my motion still stands.
Rene Rodriguez,
Aye.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Ralph Duran,
Yes.
Victor Perez,
Aye.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos.
Yes.
Item number 17, discussion and action on charter amendments, Articles 3, Section 3.07 through Section 3.11.
Do we have anything that needs to be presented today?
One page.
So, yes, so we continued with sections 3.07 through section 3.11 that was provided on your backup. Did you?
You know, I'm gonna say this. I didn't look at it. I didn't have time all this week. I've been with constituents and work and staying home. So I didn't look at it. If you guys feel that we could postpone it, we could just look at it and then take it for the next meeting.
I don't mind, so I'll second that.
Rene Rodriguez,
Aye.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Ralph Duran,
Yes.
Victor Perez,
Aye.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos.
Yes.
Do we have anything on 18, 19, or 20?
No, no, Mayor.
Do we have a motion to delete?
So move.
Second.
Who seconded?
Mr. Nevares?
I did. Oh,
Rene Rodriguez,
You did, Victor.
I think I did.
Cesar
I mean,
Nevares?
whichever one.
Yes, you did.
He did.
yes. Mr. Perez seconded. Rene Rodriguez,
Aye.
Cesar Nevares,
Yeah.
Ralph Duran,
Yes.
Victor Perez,
Aye.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second.
Third.
Rene Rodriguez,
Aye.
Cesar Nevares,
Yes.
Ralph Duran,
Yes.
Victor Perez,
Aye.
and Ivan Colom Villalobos.
Thank you, everyone. This was our first viral and it went pretty well. Our constituents, please hang in there. We're doing the best that we can for our city. We love you. And yes,
Take care, guys. Take care.
Be
Thank
safe.
you, be safe.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Come on, call me.
Who?
Call me.
Me? Okay.
Okay.
Call you. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Stay
guys.
safe. Stay safe. Can we exit?
Yes.